Hey there everybody, it's Mike DiLisio. Today I'm going to be reviewing the first expansion for the cooperative game The Loop. This is The Revenge of Fauxzilla. This is a modular type expansion that adds a number of different things that you can add into the cooperative game The Loop, which is a game that was reviewed here on the channel not too long ago. This allows you to play with some new agents, some new game modes, some new artifact cards. Why don't I just take you over to the table, show you the new parts of the expansion, then I'll come back here and let you know what I think. All right, here we see the components for The Revenge of Fauxzilla, the first expansion for The Loop. Now, I'm not going to be going into a heavy rules overview here because I'm going to be going off the assumption that you know how The Loop, a cooperative game, plays out. If you would like to see an overview for that core game, I'll go ahead and link the video in the description of this one so you can kind of check that out first. But this is going to be going under the assumption that you kind of know how The Loop plays out, all right? The Revenge of Fauxzilla is kind of a modular type of expansion. It adds a number of different things that you can play. First of all, it adds 2 new agents here. It adds some new artifact cards. It adds a couple of new mission tiles. It has our large, chunky Fauxzilla figure here that you'll be using in the 2 new game modes. And speaking of, there are also 2 new game modes that this adds that are both considered to be of high complexity. So both of the new agents and these 2 new game modes, Fauxzilla Apocalypse and the 7 Kaiju Balls, are all considered to be of high complexity level. So I would not recommend your first couple of games incorporating any of these elements into your game of The Loop. Not until you feel a little bit more comfortable, all right? So I'm going to talk very briefly about each of these different elements. First, let's talk about our 2 new agents, all right? You could theoretically just use these in any game of The Loop. Here you've got Fauxzilla, sorry. Once per turn during your action phase, you can rotate Dr. Fo's machine to an era of your choice. So that could be very powerful situationally. And then you've got the Peak Twins here. So they work together and they work apart, okay? And as it says here, they are treated as 2 agents that you control. Each time you perform an action, choose which twin to use. So that's a pretty interesting power. It can, again, situationally be very powerful, but it can also be a little bit tricky to figure out how best to synergize those 2 agents. That's why it's a more high complexity agent. All right, so let's talk briefly now about the 2 game modes. First, we'll talk about Fauxzilla Apocalypse, all right? So this has the victory condition of defeating Fauxzilla. This is not about missions. As a matter of fact, you will not use missions in this mode at all. There are some special rules here. The game will continue if there are 4 or more vortexes on the board. However, 2 in the same era still counts as a loss. You're going to have a Fauxzilla action phase, and we're talking about charging traps and damaging Fauxzilla here. So let me just get into the game a little bit. All right. As I mentioned before, you're not going to be using mission tiles. Instead, in those spots, you're going to be placing these trap tiles, which are double-sided. This is the normal side. This is the vortex side. All right? You'll be placing these trap tiles in the different eras. On your turn, what you're going to be trying to do is damage Fauxzilla and hopefully eventually defeat it by charging up these traps and then bringing Fauxzilla into the era that has a charged trap, thus dealing damage to it. How do you do that? Well, if you are in an era that has one of these 3 spots that are uncovered with a cube, and you play a matching artifact card, you can place a energy cube there. So, for example, let's say I'm in this particular era, and I use this Gamask artifact. Since it has this symbol here, and that is uncovered, I could go ahead and place a cube on that spot and still go ahead and carry out the action of that artifact. Once all 3 have been placed on here, you've now got a charged trap. And if you can bring Fauxzilla, treating it like a clone, pushing, pulling, things along those lines, into an era with a charged trap, you're going to do a damage to Fauxzilla, get an associated boon that is listed on the card, and if you're able to make it all the way down the track and defeat Fauxzilla before a loss condition occurs, that's how you win in Fauxzilla Apocalypse. Now, it's not quite that simple because Fauxzilla is going to be taking some actions as well. They're going to be adding clones as per normal. They're going to be rotating the machine and dropping rift cubes as normal. And then they're also going to be advancing the blue cube on the trap in whatever era they're in and taking an associated action. All right. So, for example, let's say that they move to this era and it's the first time they have. There's nothing on here yet. They will put it on the top one. And now they're putting a rift cube in that era. It would move down. They're putting a rift cube in the era. When it comes down here, what they're going to be doing is they're drawing a faux card, moving Fauxzilla to that era, and essentially speeding up the round, so making it go more quickly, and you have less time to get things done. Once it's at the bottom, it goes back to the top and continues to cycle. All right? So that's how Fauxzilla is going to be doing damage to you as well. If you can meet the victory conditions by defeating Fauxzilla before the loss conditions, you win. Otherwise, you lose. All right, next up, let's talk about the 7 kaiju balls, all right? And this just is kind of the backside of all of these, the tile and the 2 cards here, all right? So 7 kaiju balls is going to be using the missions, all right? You have to complete 4 missions and seal the required number of kaiju balls, depending upon difficulty level that you pick at the beginning of the game. The easiest mode is sealing 5 kaiju balls and completing 4 missions. The next highest is 6, and you use Mega Vortexes, and then the hardest is 7 kaiju balls, all 7 sealed, and you're using Mega Vortexes and completing 4 missions. So you can see this one is tricky, all right? We've got some special rules here. You're not fighting, moving, or destroying Fauxzilla at all. Fauxzilla is going to have some particular actions, and then you're going to have some special actions as agents that you can use. So let's talk about these special actions, okay? The first thing you can do is you can pick up a kaiju ball, all right? Using an artifact card that's matching the era of a kaiju ball in your era, you can pick it up. You can transfer kaiju balls that you have to or from other agents that are in the same era. You can also make Fauxzilla drop a kaiju ball. If you remove a rift cube on Fauxzilla's era, you can make it drop a kaiju ball from its Zilla nest here, all right? Or you can seal a kaiju ball, which again is part of the victory condition. While in an era on a kaiju ball that you're carrying, use a matching artifact card from that era to seal it. Each sealed kaiju ball adds an extra rift slot to that era. So as you can see, you've got these different kaiju balls that are going to be placed on particular eras. If you seal it, it makes it harder for it to break and cause a vortex, all right? So kind of a double bonus there. You are working towards a victory condition and you are giving yourself an extra rift cube you can add. However, Fauxzilla is going to be doing damage too, as you might expect. First, you'll be dropping a blue cube into the machine, moving Fauxzilla to that era where it lands, and then they're going to take the first possible action that they can on this list. It's just kind of a priority list. First, if they can, they'll take a kaiju ball from its era. If they can't do that, then they'll make an agent drop a kaiju ball in its era. If they can't do either of those, if there's a sealed kaiju ball in its era, they'll place a clone, then no action. And then they're going to continue to do adding clones, revealing cards, and then they're going to drop the rift cubes as per normal. Okay? So, victory condition there, seal kaiju balls, complete the 4 missions. And again, there are 2 new missions that have come with this game as well that you can incorporate in, or you meet one of the loss conditions and that's it. All right, well, that's essentially the Revenge of Fauxzilla. Let's head back and let you know what I think. Okay, so hopefully that gave you an idea on how the expansion, the Revenge of Fauxzilla, kind of adds to that core game experience of the loop. A cooperative game that I like quite a bit. I reviewed it highly when it first came out, and it's a game that actually has risen in estimation for me the more and more that I've played it. So, when we talk about expansions, it's going to be slightly different than a traditional review. So, as far as the components and such, they are perfectly in line with the base game. And I thought the components there were very good. The components here are good. Good quality cards, the big chunky wooden figures to represent the agents and Fauxzilla, which is especially satisfying, that big, huge figure there. The nice thick cardboard tiles for your agent boards, the trap tiles. Everything that's involved here is very high quality. Now, there's not a whole lot. That's not a problem. This is the type of expansion that I tend to like, which is kind of more of what you already know. Now, the original game of the Loop, the cooperative game, already had multiple ways that you can play the game. So adding these 2 new game modes is very much in line with the spirit of the game. You know, it was already a game that had kind of like a base mode to play, and then you could change it up by adding different things to usually make it more challenging. And as I said in the overview, everything in this expansion is really adding to the challenge. High complexity agents, high complexity game modes. As I stated, and I will reiterate in the overview, and I'll reiterate now, this is not an expansion where I would incorporate it into my first few games of the Loop. Certainly would not be something that I would incorporate if you're teaching this to somebody for the first time. Is it outrageously complex? No, it's not. Even with all this, it's still not as complex as some cooperative games can be. But I do think that it's much, much better to save this for somebody that has played the game a few times, or if it's for you, that you wait until you've played the game a number of times before you add this in, because it is a little bit more to kind of manage, to think about. You want to have the core rules internalized before you start messing with those core rules. So this is something to save for a little bit more advanced players of the Loop. That being said, I really do like those 2 new game modes. They're great. The Fauxzilla Apocalypse, I think is what it's called, is probably my favorite of the 2 because it's the biggest kind of change. So if I want the core mechanisms of the Loop, but I want a different win-loss condition, that's a really good one. I really like charging up those traps and then moving Fauxzilla into place to kind of damage them. And it adds a nice little twist to the Loop formula. The kaiju balls are good too. Those are a lot of fun. I like the little subtle twist that adds, although with that one, you are still playing with those missions. But to be fair, I really like that mission system. That's one of the aspects of the Loop I like. So it's certainly not a downgrade to have those missions. It just is a little bit more familiar to you if you've played the Loop before. The new artifacts are great. Again, those 2 new agents are fun. I particularly like the twins because I like how that allows you to kind of think a little bit differently on your turn. And so this is another of those expansions that are more of the same. An expansion to a game that I already like is usually already on good footing. I feel like everything that they've added with this expansion is very good. Just again, keeping in mind that it is mostly for people that are experienced players of the Loop. So if you are an experienced player, or if you're buying this for somebody that has played the Loop a lot, you know that they like it, this is a rock solid addition to that product. I'm giving this an 8 out of 10, a strong recommendation for people that have played it and want something to change it up. The Revenge of Fauxzilla is a really, really nice option for you. All right, well, there you have it. This is Mike DiLisio signing off from Dice Tower headquarters.